Hey there. You're listening to True Story No Cap. Real stories, no exaggeration, no lies. Just the raw, unfiltered moments life throws our way. Relax, lean back, and let's get started. Tears flowed from Eleanor's eyes in an unending stream. The world blurred before her. She saw nothing around her. A single thought hammered in her head. A relentless question. Why? Why had her fate turned out this way? Eleanor's childhood was one of plenty. The only daughter surrounded by the boundless love of a father who fulfilled her every wish. But this didn't make Eleanor capricious or spoiled. She repaid her parents with sincere affection and striking determination in her studies. School with a gold medal, university with honors, all were the fruits of her diligence, not her parents' connections. Sport was also a part of her life, bringing well-deserved awards earned through hard work and sweat. Her father, proud of his daughter, brought her into the family business, began involving her in affairs. And here, too, Eleanor proved herself, impressing him with her sharp mind and business acumen. But fate dealt the first cruel blow. Her father died suddenly, in absurd circumstances. A hunting accident, a falling tree, right on his head. Death was instantaneous. For Eleanor, Daddy's girl, this was not just grief, but a catastrophe. However, possessing astonishing inner strength and an almost masculine resilience of character, she managed not to break. Eleanor not only returned to the business, but firmly took her father's place at the head of the company. Relationships with her mother had never been warm, rather strained from childhood. Her mother seemed to compete with her daughter for her husband's attention, forgetting her own role. Eleanor loved her, despite the lack of understanding and the distance. Barely having recovered from her father's loss, Eleanor faced a new tragedy. A heart attack sent her mother to the hospital, from which she never returned. Death occurred a week later. And again, tears, a funeral, a farewell. This entire series of losses fell upon Eleanor in less than a year. Left completely alone, she found salvation in work. Immersing herself in company affairs, she stopped noticing the world around her, forced too early to take on the burden of responsibility not only for herself, but also for the fates of hundreds of employees. Loneliness became her constant companion. Eleanor never had time for close friendships. Studies, sports, and then work consumed all her energy. There were acquaintances, friends, but there was no one she could confide in, no one with whom she could share her innermost thoughts. Her only true friend was her father, and his absence, even 3 years later, was still felt as a sharp pain. And then, when loneliness seemed insurmountable, he appeared in her life. Their meeting at a city event where Eleanor was present as a major sponsor and Daniel as the son of an influential politician was completely accidental. Daniel immediately caught her eye, handsome, incredibly charismatic. Their relationship developed rapidly. After 3 months, a proposal of marriage was made, and Eleanor, blinded by feelings, accepted. Soon they married, and Daniel moved into her spacious house. However, the family idyll quickly turned to disappointment. Within a couple of months of the wedding, Daniel began disappearing at night, returning only in the morning. He was in no hurry to work, content with the position of a rich woman's husband. Disturbing rumors reached Eleanor about his infidelities and that his marriage was merely a calculation, but she pushed these thoughts away, blindly trusting her husband. At the same time, his complete inactivity bothered her. She offered him help in starting his own business, but Daniel found any excuse. Thus passed almost a year, until one day Eleanor received an anonymous call informing her that her husband was currently at a roadside hotel with a mistress, even giving the room number. Tired of the uncertainty and suspicion, Eleanor decided to go and see everything with her own eyes, either to dispel or confirm her worst fears. Having driven up to the hotel, Eleanor paused for a moment, hesitating. Was she doing the right thing? But then she checked herself. I must know the truth. If he's not here, no one will know about my foolishness. And if he is, then I don't need a husband like that. Gathering her courage, she stepped resolutely inside and went up to the required floor. At the door of the specified room, she stopped, listening. From behind the door came the sound of ringing female laughter. She took a deep breath and knocked confidently. The door was opened by a young woman, looking surprised at the uninvited guest. "Who are you looking for?" she asked. "Excuse me, may I come in?" Eleanor's voice trembled. "Why on earth?" "We're busy and not expecting anyone." the woman retorted sharply, turning back into the room. Danny, someone's here for you. Daniel came out of the room. He had only a towel around his hips. Eleanor stared at her husband, refusing to believe her eyes. What did you need? What were you lacking? Surely all this was just for money? Tears welled up in her throat. Ellie, it's not what you think. Not what I think? What could be more foolish in this situation? She pierced him, struck by his cynicism. Gathering her last strength, Eleanor said firmly, I hope you have fun. Your things will be sent to this address. She rushed out of the hotel, barely touching the ground, as if escaping a pursuit that wasn't there. She wanted to hide in the deepest corner, to disappear. There were no woods nearby, but trees were visible in the distance, either a park or a grove. Eleanor rushed there, wherever her eyes led her, without noticing the road. She didn't remember how she ended up by the railway tracks. She looked around, trying to understand where she was, but her consciousness was hazy, as if in a fog. Tears still flowed from her eyes, blurring the world. The same single question hammered in her head. Why? Why had her life turned out this way? Suddenly, Eleanor stopped. Her head swam, nausea rose. The last thing she managed to think was that she hadn't eaten anything today. And then the world went dark, and she fell, losing consciousness. She regained consciousness because someone was roughly dragging her along the ground. When her mind cleared, Eleanor found herself in a cramped, squalid room, like a storage closet. A young man sat nearby whose appearance left no doubt. He was homeless. Her heart clenched with fear. What was he going to do? But his face showed no aggression, rather concern. Seeing that she had come to, he spoke hastily. Thank goodness you're awake. How do you feel? Were you trying to throw yourself under a train? Or did you just fall? You're incredibly lucky I was nearby. Another second and you would have been crushed by the commuter train. I barely managed to pull you away. He said something else, but Eleanor had difficulty perceiving reality. Completely coming to her senses, she looked at him with understanding now. Where am I? And what's your name? She asked. Ethan. And this is my temporary shelter, he introduced himself. Ethan looked at Eleanor carefully, clearly intending to ask about the reasons for her desperate act, but then restrained himself. Everyone has their own grief. Why open old wounds? He thought. But Eleanor herself, as if a dam had broken, began to tell him about her husband's betrayal, about her flight, about how she ended up by the tracks. Ethan, you saved me. Thank you so much. Her voice trembled. My ex-husband is certainly not worth throwing oneself under a train for. Now it was Eleanor's turn to ask, and you? Why are you here? Such a young man. Where is your family? Ethan lowered his eyes. He was uncomfortable, but her frankness was disarming. All right, I'll tell you. He sighed and recounted his bitter story. He was from a wealthy family, an only brother. His parents died in a car accident. His father left the business to him, but his brother couldn't accept it. He framed Ethan so badly that he was forced to hide. His brother promised to help with money, but never sent a penny. Ethan found himself in a strange city, without documents, without money, without the possibility of getting a job. And recently, news came. His brother had declared him missing. Can you imagine? Ethan smiled bitterly. To return is dangerous. Those he owes are waiting for him. To stay here is hopeless. They won't even hire me as a loader. So, Eleanor, your story, with all due respect, is not the worst. You were betrayed by your husband, and I was betrayed by my own brother. Eleanor listened, and her heart ached with pity for this young man who had saved her life. Without hesitation, she made a decision. Ethan, here's my plan, she said firmly. First, we go to my place. You'll clean up, a bath, clean clothes. Then we'll take care of your appearance, a hairdresser, a new haircut, and of course we'll buy you all the necessary clothes. Seeing that he was about to object, she stopped him with a gesture. Don't even think about arguing. It's useless, Eleanor cut in. You saved me from certain death. I am indebted to you, and I don't accept refusals. I know how to be grateful and never forget kindness. Let's go. We need to find my car. They got out of the cramped closet and headed towards the hotel where Eleanor had left her car. To her surprise, Daniel was standing by the car. Eleanor walked up to him, not hiding her contempt. What are you hoping for? She asked coldly. Do you think I'll just forget everything? Don't count on it. Pack your belongings today and be out of my house. Daniel opened his mouth, but, noticing Ethan, he stopped and burst into laughter. Well, Who did you find to replace me? A unique specimen, he mocked. Couldn't find any normal men? Sunk to hobos? Eleanor had always been able to stand up for herself and for those she cared about. You know what? She replied calmly but firmly. This man, whom you so contemptuously call a hobo, turned out to be 100 times more decent and noble than you. You're not fit to tie his shoelaces. My marriage to you was the biggest mistake of my life, she added bitterly, but I'm going to fix it. Without giving him a chance to recover, Eleanor took Ethan's hand and they got into the car, driving away rapidly. While Ethan washed off the street dirt, Eleanor called a hairdresser to the house and ordered men's clothing and shoes online. Everything needed was delivered surprisingly quickly. When Ethan, freshly shaved and trimmed, came out of the bathroom in a new robe, Daniel's former robe, Eleanor gasped. Standing before her was not a homeless man, but a very handsome, attractive man, who also looked much younger than his years. Now that's completely different, Eleanor exclaimed with admiration. I suggest we celebrate this event, my second birthday and your return to life. Shall we go somewhere? Ethan, very hungry after a long period of wandering, gladly agreed. To his surprise, all the clothes Eleanor had chosen fit perfectly. How did you manage to guess the size so accurately without trying them on? He asked, admiring her talent. Eleanor laughed. I just have a good eye. I often ordered things online for my father and my ex-husband. I'm glad I pleased you. And the style? Do you like it? I chose based on my taste, she clarified. Everything is perfect. You hit the nail on the head, he smiled. Ethan, we're almost the same age, Eleanor suggested. Maybe we can switch to you? Let's, he readily replied. He felt comfortable and pleasant next to this girl. Eleanor also didn't take her interested gaze off him. Now that the traces of his wandering had disappeared, it was clear that before her was not just a handsome man, but also a clearly well-mannered and educated person. What an injustice, she thought. He could have just perished in obscurity because of his brother's meanness. At the restaurant, the evening flew by unnoticed. They laughed a lot, talked about their past, about their parents' childhood, student years. It seemed they spoke the same language, understanding each other with half a word. In the midst of their pleasant conversation, Eleanor's phone rang. She excused herself and stepped away, returning about 10 minutes later with a radiant face. Something happened? Good news? Ethan asked. Excellent, Eleanor exclaimed. My lawyers worked lightning fast. The divorce papers are ready. Tomorrow I will officially cease to be his wife. I don't want to drag it out. Congratulations, Ethan said sincerely. Thank you. But that's not all. Eleanor smiled mysteriously. While I was talking, I was told something about your brother. Ethan, I will help you get back what rightfully belongs to you, your father's business. How? Is that possible? Who are you? An angel? He whispered, and tears welled up in his eyes. So, it turns out you saved me, not I you, he continued, his voice trembling. You brought me back to life. I don't know how to thank you. No need for thanks, Eleanor replied softly. It's a joy for me to help you. So, do you agree to work with me? Of course I agree, Ethan said firmly. Then, after a pause, he added, Now I understand everything. What exactly? Eleanor asked in surprise. Ethan took her hand, his gaze serious. You were in my dream, he began. My meeting with you there, by the tracks, was not accidental. I fell asleep and I had an incredibly vivid dream. A girl is walking in a pale blue dress, and behind her are huge white wings. A real angel. And suddenly she falls, right onto the rails. And at that very moment I heard someone's voice, very clear. Get up, you must save the angel. I woke up and ran there, and I saw you, in exactly the same blue dress. He squeezed her hand. I'm not inclined to mysticism, but this is not a coincidence. You are my angel. Thank you. So that's it, Eleanor whispered, looking at him with tenderness and mischief. After a pause, she added, Well then, since I'm your guardian angel, it seems we'll have to be together. Angels don't abandon those they've saved. Ethan smiled and they both laughed, feeling that a new, bright chapter was beginning in their lives.